Hey, greetings music lovers, hobbyists, collectors, and fine arts enthusiasts. Hey, today I thought I'd give you a little tour of the clocks I've been collecting. Sometimes I'm working on guitars, sometimes I'm working on clocks, sometimes I'm just BSing. Oh, by the way, I'm sporting my brand new Tractor Supply cap I bought for $4.99 the other day. What do you think, huh? Pretty nice. Well, let's get this tour on the way. I've got a couple of new clocks I've got in my collection, and I haven't made any tutorials about working on clocks here lately, but I'll show you what I've got so far, and maybe you'll be interested in it anyway. Okay, let's do it. Let's do this thing. Alrighty. Alright, the first clock I kind of like to show you, this right here is a Seth Thomas clock. It's an old mantle clock. As you can see, it's kind of got a marble wood finish to it, and the clock is from 1900. Seth Thomas stamped the date on the clocks. You can either find a date stamped on the back in big black letters, or it'll be on the bottom. Like on these mantle clocks, the date is usually stamped on the bottom, and the date is backwards. So instead of saying 1900, it would have 0091. It would be in reverse. I'm not sure why they did that, but I've got a couple of Seth Thomas clocks, and they're both like that. And this one here is, I had to do a little work on it. I took the movement out of it. It wasn't chiming when I bought it. Also, there was a celluloid, decorative celluloid thing that went around the face of this clock, and it was all crumbled and falling apart, and I kind of scraped it off and repainted that. I don't know if I'm going to leave the clock exactly like that or not. I don't know from this picture if you can tell that I did that or not, but so far I'm gonna throw around a few ideas and see if I can't make that look a little better. But anyway, getting back to the repair of the clock. I took the movement out, and it wasn't gonging, and something had got bent on the side. There's little rods in there that trips the mechanism where it gongs, and then there's a wheel that it's a counter. It's a counting wheel, and it would that part would work, but when you got to up to the hour, it wouldn't flip it over to the counting wheel. So I had to take it apart and fix that. Other than that, right now I'm trying to get it to run in time. I've got it pretty close, 24 hours. It's within a couple of minutes. So now let's move on here. Here's a few clocks I have in my collection that I've got up in my office room here. This is where I sit on Facebook most days. And this one here, that's a Waterbury clock. When I bought that, the spring was goofed up in it. It's set over at the antique shop over at in Niles, Michigan, Picker's Paradise. They had it, and it did not run. The spring wasn't broke. But sometimes people will turn them the wrong way, and the little click that on the spring ratchet, it gets turned backwards. Well, this time it did that, and it broke the spring that holds the little click ratchet onto the gear. So I had to kind of come up with a spring to hold that click up on the ratchet part. So I kind of took a ink pen apart, took the spring out of that. Fashioned a little rod inside on the gear, and put that spring in there. It's been working fine since there. I had to kind of tap the rivet down on the click, and it winds up and everything. Keeps excellent time. It's a beautiful clock. This clock right here is probably from the early 1900s, late 1800s, probably early 1900s, and brand new. I've got a copy of a catalog of the Waterbury clocks. And brand new, as ornate as this clock is, cost $11.30 back in the day when it was new. This is an old Ingram clock I bought from LaPorte at Coachman. We've had this clock for maybe 10 years now. It had 2 broken springs on it when I bought it, and she's been running good. This is an old Gilbert clock I bought over at Picker's Paradise in Niles, Michigan, and this clock here did not have a movement inside it. I just bought the shell, And I happen to have a Gilbert movement at home, and I put that movement in there, and it's, man, it made a nice clock. This is a Blackbird clock. That's the model of it. Early 1900s, late 1800s, somewhere in there. This is an old Ingram clock. I bought that one down at exit 76 there in southern Indiana. And I didn't really do anything to that. Oh, I put a pendulum on that one there. I think that's the pendulum was missing on it, but it's been running fine since I brought it home. All right, let's move on. Here's one of my favorite clocks that I've collected right here. This clock is an OG clock, and it was made anywhere from 1850 to 1855, and I'll tell you how I know the date, and I'll tell you a little history of this clock right here. Okay, let me get close to it. Let's open it up. All right, appears to be running. This clock was manufactured by Morris and Company right here, Plymouth Hollow, Connecticut. They made clocks for a while, and what happened is, in 1855, this clock factory burned down. So they didn't make clocks any longer after 1855, so I know that's how old this clock is anyway. After that, they started another company called the American Knife Company, and they made straight razors and pocket knives and different cutlery. And I've got a straight razor from about 1865 that was made by this guy here. Now, the guy who owned this company was Miles Morse Jr. And what kind of brought me towards buying this clock is the last name Morse. And I got the clock home and come to find out this is a distant cousin of mine. Let me just move over this way a little bit. Here's our family tree right here, if you can read this. This would be me on the bottom right here. And here's Miles Morris Jr. And we share the same grandfather up here, which is John Lathrop right there. He was kind of a prominent person in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And so, yeah, he's connected to our family, the guy who built that clock. Also, one interesting part about Miles, or a thing about Miles Morris Jr. is Seth Thomas clocks was also in Plymouth Hollow. And Seth Thomas also made clocks similar to this, and they made clocks right up. After a while, in the 1860s, they changed the name of Plymouth Hollow, Connecticut to Thomaston, after Seth Thomas. Now, Miles Morris Jr., he was married to Seth Thomas's daughter. So Seth Thomas would have been Miles Morris's father-in-law. So there was a family connection there. Yeah, just an oldie. I kind of like the idea. You know, I think sometimes nobody thinks about this, but geez, come on, stay. I think the picture on these clocks are probably worth more than the clock is, actually. That's hand painted on the underside of the glass. So I thought you'd enjoy seeing that one there. Alrighty. Now this one here, this is an old Sessions clock. I'd say early 1900s. It's in perfect shape. I kind of took a buffing wheel on it when I first got it. Spring was broke on it. Let me back up a little bit here. And get you, there we go. Yeah, probably about 1915 or something like that. Sometimes the Waterburys and the Sessions clocks, they both wind counterclockwise. And I think sometimes what happens is when somebody has, back in the day, they had several clocks in their house, they go to wind them and they turn them backwards on the gong side. And because usually on an Ingram or some other clocks or a Gilbert, it'll wind clockwise. And if you grab that thing and wind it clockwise, you mess the click up on the ratchet, and that's what was wrong with this clock here. Had to take the movement out and fix that. And got it home, and it runs fine. it was kind of nice to see. There was a little, inside the clock, there was a little note in there where somebody had fixed it, I think in around 1940 or something like that. And the guy lived in Petersburg, Indiana. This clock came from Crawfordsville. That's where I bought it, down in Crawfordsville, Indiana, at Cabbages and Kings, I think the name of the antique shop was. That's where that one came from. Now this one here, it's an old Ingram. It's about in around late 1800s. It's a wood finish clock. Keeps perfect time. Found that one down at exit 76 down there in Indiana, there off of 65. Now let's move down to the basement. Now this is an old German movement clock. A friend of mine, Jim Gunning, gave me a while back. I think I've had the clock for about a year. He gave it to me. It had a broken spring on one of the chimes, and it's a German clock, like I said. It had a ergos movement in it, and I work on clocks, but not on German clocks so much, because the springs are in a enclosed, and I can change the spring, but not. I can sneak a spring into a movement, but I can't take a movement apart and they're in a barrel, these old springs. So I found the movement for it and lubed it up, and it's been running fine for a while. It's a nice clock. Too bad I got it in the basement right now. What I need to do is finish this basement off. I've been at it about 10 years, it's in the planning stage. So that's what I need to do here. You can see it's just basement walls here. But here's my let me back up a little bit. This is my timbre clocks right here, timbre mantles. And this top one here, my friend Terry gave me, it's a nice sessions clock. It looks like it needs to be wound. This is an old Ingram we bought at some antique shop probably 15 years ago. Now here's another Waterbury clock right here. No, wait a minute. I'm on the wrong clock. There we go. This is a German clock here. It's made by the Cuckoo Clock Company of New York. And I bought that at an antique shop for 10 bucks. So, and also at the same time I bought it, I bought this Waterbury clock. If you can see, it's kind of dark in here. And that one had an electric movement in it, but the mechanical movement was actually inside the clock. So I took the electric out of there, the quartz movement out, and I put that one back in. The only thing that was wrong was the suspension spring was messed up on it, and I put a new suspension spring in it. And here's an old clock down here, an old New Haven clock. Yeah, let's move along here. Moving into the old basement room here. Man, one day I'm going to have to finish this basement off. I got this wall here, these are all New Haven clocks right here. This one here, as you can see, it's the model is the 8-day white star line model. And that's kind of a unique name for a clock. Back then in the day, I think this was probably very early 1900s, before 1912 anyway. And a lot of you know, well, here's the label that's on the back of the clock, or a copy of it right here. A lot of you know the White Star line was the line that owned the Titanic. And I thought that was a pretty unique thing to have. This New Haven clock right here is a 30-day. It's from about 1866. Here's his brother right here from about 1870. That clock is a 30-day. Here's a clock right here that's also a New Haven. That's an 8-day, and that's an 8-day clock here. Now over here, that's my beautiful daughter, only she's grown up now in her 40s. That one there is another Seth Thomas clock. It has the date stamped on the back there. Here's an old German clock. I've been looking to find a movement for it. It's got the wrong movement in it. This is an Ansonia right here. I hear some of them talking to me back here. There's an old Seth Thomas schoolhouse clock. No gongs, probably hung in an office or a school somewhere at one time. That's also Seth Thomas, like I said, and it's got the date 1918 stamped on the back. There's a Welch clock right there, Ian Welch, good clock. Let's move into dark, turn some lights on. Hey, we got more clocks here. Top one, that's an old Sessions clock. I built that. That's a Frankenstein right there, a Franken clock. I built that from parts I had left over. I bought the clock to get the movement out, and then I had the clock case, and then I got another movement, and I got an older face. I took the nice face and the nice movement out of that and put it in this clock down here. Actually, I bought that clock to fix this clock because it's such a pretty clock. Here's an old Ingram right there. That's from 1899. And the one down at the bottom, that's an old Sessions clock there. It's not much to look at, but it's a clock. It's ticking. My buddy Terry, he gave me this one right here. Now, that is a clock from the 70s. Keeps really good time. And this clock is, I forget what it is. Let me see. Ridgeway. They make grandfather clocks. I think they're still in business today. No, I think Howard Miller Clocks bought them. And they're from Michigan, I think. But they made a nice clock. Oh, we're talking. One of them's talking here somewhere. Here's an old electric. It's an old Ingram electric right there. Actually, that's my son's, and it's sitting here. I've got two of these. His is his, and just put the glass on it. On this wall here, these are all Ingram clocks right here. That one actually has a new movement in it. I put that movement in about 10 years ago. It's a brand new movement, made in India. So that's not really got an Ingram movement in it. That's an old clock right there. I'll show you another clock later. I actually bought that clock from Picker's Paradise over in Niles, and I actually bought it not for the clock, but it had, let me get my finger in the production here. It had a thermometer here, and it had a barometer here, and I actually bought the clock for those parts. It's a nice clock. It's kind of really got patina on the face and everything. Here's an old clock right down here. I put this together. This is an old Frankenstein clock. I put that one together from different parts, and I've had this clock for a while. This clock here used to be in our kitchen. It's an old Ingram clock from 1919. We got one here running. That's a 30-hour clock, and that clock right there is a Waterbury 30-hour. Now I just bought this one right here that's running, if you can see it. That's a Meiji clock from Japan right there. And I just bought that off of Marketplace here a couple days ago. It runs like a top. I'm still kind of adjusting the time. It looks like it's about right. But that clock was probably from 1921 right there. Beautiful clock, beautiful case and everything. Let's move along here. We've got another Japanese clock right here, if you can see it. That's a Sakosha clock right there. Early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, I'm not sure. Japan was big in the clocks. And this one here, it's got the chimes. It's an old schoolhouse clock. And bought that off of Marketplace not long ago. Keeps pretty good time. But this company evolved into the Seiko company. I got another clock here. That's just from the 1970s. It's not really how I would consider an antique, I guess. And it's an old schoolhouse clock. Got a couple of, here's an old Gilbert clock here. That's a Frankenstein clock also. I put that together from parts. The top of it's actually missing. And there's another old Ingram clock right here. All right, let's move along in here. Now this clock here we used to have hanging in our living room, and it's an old Chinese clock from about 1895. I did put a new movement in it because it was, back when I first started collecting clocks, I got this clock for like 30 bucks off of eBay. and messed the movement up in it somehow. I wish I had the movement now. I could probably, what I've learned through the years, I probably could fix the movement and put it back in there. But I put a new movement in it, and it's been running pretty good. Also, here's a clock here. This is a old German cuckoo clock. Looks like it needs to be wound almost, right here. But this clock right here, my dad bought that clock, and this clock is hung in our living room when I was born. And it's probably, he bought it probably in maybe the late 1940s. And I could tell when everybody was going to bed, because the last thing I'd hear laying in bed is that clock being wound every night. And that was our main clock in the living room when I was a kid, right there. Okay, a little earlier in the video, I was telling you about the clock I bought over at Picker's Paradise. I bought it for the parts. It was an old gingerbread clock. And here are the parts. This is our kitchen here. And we have this old Waterbury clock hanging in our kitchen. And it matches everything in the kitchen. And let me get a close look. You can see the clock. I put the parts on this clock and completed this clock. And it makes a nice clock out of it. On the right, you see there's a thermometer there. Of course, you've got to really get up there and look, because that clock is probably from the late 1800s, I'm going to guess. And also a barometer. Probably when that barometer was new, it had a colored liquid in it of some sort, and it would move up and down and let you know how the weather was going to be. This clock also, if you see that red hand up there, it's got a calendar on it. I think I need to move the calendar up because we only had 30 days. So I got to get up there and move the calendar. And yeah, that clock keeps the accurate time. It's a nice old oak clock. It matches all the stuff we've got in our kitchen here. And we bought that off the marketplace from a lady for 25 bucks. It also had the spring bat on it. Like I said, the click ratchet was messed up on it. Had to take the clock apart, and all I did was tap the rivet and tighten that click ratchet up, and the spring was fine after that. But it was on the gong side, and I think people that get these clocks, they start winding them the wrong way, and they do that to the click ratchet. I think that's what happens, because I fixed two Waterburys like that, and a number of sessions clock. If I get a sessions clock, like the one I showed you earlier that's sitting right here, if I get a sessions clock and see it at the antique shop for a cheap price, I usually look in the back and find one of the springs, the click ratchet is messed up on it. And I think it's from people turning the spring the wrong way. So, yeah, let's move on. Here's an old Ingram oak clock case, old oak clock. We've got it in our bedroom. It keeps pretty good time. And it's from 1911. And we've had this clock, man, for years. Okay, last but not least is this clock hanging on our wall here. This is a Linden clock. Now, I'll tell you how things are. We bought this clock brand new, and it's now an antique, so that's how old I am. We bought this clock at Veneer, China, over just outside of Michigan City, probably about 1975, so that's how old that clock is. Runs good. It's got a little man that hits a bell on the hour and the half hour. And really enjoyed this clock through the years. We've never had it worked on. I think I took the movement apart one time and cleaned it and oiled it, and that's about it. But yeah, she's hanging in my office room there. So these are some of the clocks I got in my collection. I didn't show you all of them, but these are some of them. And the nicer clocks I always keep up in the main part of the house. The other ones I have hanging down in the basement. Although that one new Japanese clock, that Meiji, that's been a pretty nice clock. I had that for a couple days, and I'd like to find a spot up here for it, but yeah, you can't have everything. All right, I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my clocks here. You know, when you're a retired guy, you got to do something. I don't know why I'm infatuated so much with clocks, but you know, it's kind of a neat thing that most of my clocks are well over 100 years old, and they're still ticking, and it doesn't take much to keep them going. You know, that's something to say about American ingenuity and the industrial age right there. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hey, take care. See you later. Bye now.